To be charged or cleared, South African court delays its decision on whether to dismiss charges against President-in-waiting Jacob Zuma. Is democracy being upheld or undermined in the process? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm Sami Zaidan. A South African judge seems to be in no hurry to decide whether to let the trial of the ANC leader go ahead. Well, the judge says he'll wait until September the 12th before making that call. Critics say Jacob Zuma is just trying to delay the proceedings. But the party leader says he's fighting for justice against a conspiracy to bring him down. Zuma insists he'll stand down only if he's found guilty. Well, although the ruling ANC party is standing squarely behind him, some feel the case is leading the ANC and the country down a dangerous path. Mike Hanna has more.
A shrill cry of support for Jacob Zuma, and the ANC president clearly winning in the court of public opinion, eager to put his point of view to his supporters.
You are innocent until proven otherwise. Why do you judge Jacob Zuma beforehand?
But his battle in the High Court over the road not over. Jacob Zuma will now have to wait until the middle of next month to find out whether or not the corruption trial against him will proceed. Judgment in this complex case being reserved.
The ANC leader has argued that the corruption charges brought against him were unlawful, as he was given no representation when they were being formulated. The state says that Jacob Zuma has the right to answer the charges in court.
The legal process involving Jacob Zuma has now lasted for the better part of a decade. And with yet another delay, there's no indication when it will be over. National elections take place next year. As leader of the ANC, Jacob Zuma would most likely become president of South Africa. The possibility looming that a man could assume the country's highest office before serious criminal charges against him have been answered. Mike Hanna, Inside Story, Pietermaritzburg.
Well, joining us now, our guests in Johannesburg, Pat Craven, he's the spokesperson for the Congress of South African Trade Unions. And in London, William Gumade, he's author of the book Thabo Mbeki and the Battle for the Soul of the ANC. Thanks for joining us, both of you. If I could start, though, with Pat. Is Mr Zuma the victim of a political conspiracy or simply his own greed?
Kasatu would certainly agree with your first suggestion, a political conspiracy. We have believed from the outset that the main driving force behind this prosecution was not to enforce the law, but to conduct a political campaign within the ANC and within broader society against somebody who was challenging to become the leader of the African National Congress, and if possible to prevent that happening.
But
and of course, as we know now, they didn't succeed in that.
Sorry, forgive me for interrupting, but
well,
if it's a conspiracy, who is conspiring? Why haven't you ever named, or his supporters ever named, who exactly is behind this conspiracy?
Well, conspirators by their very nature are not out in the open. And obviously, if we knew precisely who was behind this, but we can certainly identify certain institutions of the state, the National Prosecuting Authority and the Scorpions, together with some allies in the media, who have conducted a consistent campaign to leak stories to the media, implying Jacob Zuma's guilt, and without being able to back it up, even at one stage admitting that they didn't have a case against him, or at least not sufficient of a case to win it in the court, and yet the thing dragged on and on and on. And in the meantime, the more thorough inquiry into the arms deal, which might have revealed the full truth, has been stifled. And so Kasatu is saying, if we're serious about corruption, let's look at the whole arms deal. Let's look at everybody who was involved and all the allegations, some of which have only resurfaced again this Sunday in the media, rather than singling out one individual and trying to cobble together a case against him.
Why then, what motive, I guess your opponents would argue, what motive would those elements you mentioned have in the media and in the state to target Jacob Zuma in particular, rather than going after more powerful people in the government?
Well, possibly it was more powerful people in the government who were involved. We don't know. But as you know, there was a very fierce battle within the ANC in which Jacob Zuma was one of the contenders, ultimately the victorious contender. And we believe that that battle was being fought out in proxy as well in the legal arena. But it wasn't a legal struggle, it was part and parcel of a political struggle.
All right, let's bring William into this discussion. I guess what can be said at least is the number of times that charges have been brought against Jacob Zuma and dropped. Is that perhaps an indication that there isn't a strong case against him, that perhaps he is being unfairly focused upon?
I think I would take it from a different angle, is that, I mean, one of the reasons why this case has dragged on so long is that Mr Zuma also, I mean, he's been appealing at every opportunity, so that has dragged it out and so on. So he's, I think, partially responsible also for it being dragged out. I mean, his strategy has been, his advocate, Mr. J. Kemp, said before that his legal and his political strategies to try to block his prosecution would be based on appealing, all the time. And even, today's, if there's any conclusion about, today's hearing, Mr. Zuma said he intended to appeal if it goes against him. So
but it's not
I think,
only, forgive me as well for interrupting, the case is not dragged on only because he's been appealing. I mean, there have been instances in the past, in 2003 and 2006, where charges have been dropped or modified because the prosecutor said, actually, we don't have a strong enough case.
I think the bigger picture here is, unfortunately what's happening here is this is the internal fight of the ANC. That the ANC doesn't have the leadership, doesn't have the capacity, and it doesn't have the strategy to deal with a problem, with a leadership problem within the ANC itself. Now, I think, part of Mr. Zuma's legal problems is also to do with politics.
All right, let's take that point to Pat. I guess some would say if he has nothing to fear, why not just face the charges? Why all the quote-unquote delay tactics?
Well, as William says, the delays have been much more the responsibility of the prosecution team than the defence team. And all he has been doing is defending his legal rights, which anybody, I think, would do in those circumstances where he felt that he was being unfairly treated, because the argument, well, go to court and hear the charges, would be fine if you were confident you would get a fair trial and the evidence would be presented fairly. But the whole way in which this case has been conducted so far makes it highly unlikely, we would say now impossible, that he will get a fair trial.
But isn't his point, his critics, sorry, but his critics would argue Pat, he hasn't even got to the point where he's willing to face the charges. He's arguing over the technicalities in which the charges were brought against him.
No, but the charges may not have been presented formally, but they've certainly been well leaked in the media. It's quite clear the way in which the prosecution is thinking, and it's quite clear to him and to his team that on that basis he's not going to get a fair trial. He's already been tried through the media, through leaked versions of what he's being accused of, and effectively found guilty even before he's got to court.
All right, William, perhaps the strategy some are suggesting is that if Jacob Zuma can delay this until he actually becomes president, constitutional change could be in hand to ensure presidential immunity from prosecution and charges. Is that a possibility?
Absolutely, it's a possibility, and I think my worry has been about this trial is, I think the way Mr. Zuma and his supporters have conducted, their defense. The first thing is, the criticisms, or rather not even criticisms, the attacks. I think on institutions, on democratic institutions in South Africa, the judiciary, that is banding of the Scorpions, to me, those are really troubling, big troubling issues. Even if there's a conspiracy against Mr. Zuma, I think there's a way that you have to deal with it. We've still a very young democracy. Our institutions are very weak still, hasn't consolidated. And the way one attacks these institutions like the judiciary, it has an impact on, on its independence, on its integrity, and so on. And to respond more directly on your question about possible immunity, I mean, this has been Mr. Zuma's strategy: delay the legal process until presumably becomes president next year, and then he will have the power to amend the constitution in order to get immunity.
All right, we're coming here to the bigger picture, but it is now time for a short break. When we come back, is democracy under threat in South Africa? Stay with us.